we'll be discussing pod affinity. Pod affinity. And this is just a feature that allows pods to be scheduled beside one another, right? And in fact, you can still do what? Allow them to not be scheduled beside one another, right? And just like Node Affinity, it allows fine-grained control, right? Fine-grained control by using the operator, right? So for instance now, you can say pod A and pod B, right? If this one have label of, let's say, my app, and there is a label selector that matches the expression, and the key is my app, right? Put them in a particular node, and this one, if this matches the same two, then put them together, right? So in this case, you use the operator in, just like we used it in Node Affinity. And the same way, you can say pod A should not be scheduled, so it will be not in the same node, so they should be far away from each other, right? So not in, this will be not in, while this will be in. And after then we need to discuss the two types, which is, they have two types, which is the hard and the soft, right? So we have hard pod affinity, and we also have soft pod affinity. This is if you find the pod with same label, right? Then by all means, right, add requirement. I want you to schedule it beside hard requirement, right? Hard pod affinity. So this is going to be required, but this is soft, which is going to be referred, right, according to the weight. If you find it, fine, put it there. If you don't, put it in another, put it next to other pods as well. It doesn't matter, right? So with that being said, let's just go to our terminal to see this. So I'm just going to say kind get cluster, and you see my mini cluster, that's the one I was using before. I'll say kubectl get pods, and I have my pod from Affinity, from Node Affinity, and this time we want to do pod affinity, right? So I'm going to say vim, I'm going to call this 03, I'm going to say pod affinity, and I'm going to say hard, right? I'm going to say hard.yaml. And with that being said, we are going to start writing it. So I'm going to say hi API version should be v1, and the kind of object we want to write is going to be pod. And what are the details? Metadata. We're going to give the name of that pod. I'm going to call it pod C hard. That's what I'm going to give it, right? And I'm going to come down, so this is not supposed to be here, right? And I'm going to come down. We are going to specify the labels that I want to give it, right? And this is going to be labels. And I'm going to say this is going to be my key. Okay, I'm going to say hab should be my key, and my hab should be the value, right? Key value. So after that has been done, let's write the specification which will contain our affinity. And just like Node Affinity, we are going to say affinity, so they know the type of what we're writing is affinity. And this time it's going to be pod affinity, right? And then we have to have required during scheduling, ignore during execution, right? So you have, this is hard requirement, right? And then instead of having node selector terms, we are going to have label selector. So this is going to be label selector, and we are going to say match expressions. So if it match the expressions, and this time we are going to have our key, which is hap, right? And we are going to have our operator, which is very important, which is going to be in. And then we are going to have our values. We're going to have our values. And our values is going to be my hap, right? Please beware of issues with this thing. So let's see very well if we've not made any mistake. And right here we should have this label. Should have something like this, right? And match expressions should be here, and key should be here, operator, and values, and like this. Great. So now if we come down here, we need to pass something, topologyKey, and this is saying, please, I want to deploy this inside this particular cluster that we are on. So I'm going to say Kubernetes.io/host name, right? And this is good, and let's be wary of typos, and this is good and great. Let's now write details about our container. I'm going to say containers, and I'm going to give the name. I'm going to say name equals my web server. That's the name I'm going to give it, and I'm going to say the container as well should be nginx, right? So before we leave, let's check if everything is right. Protocol key, topology key, and required during scheduling, ignore during the execution. We have port affinity, and other port C hard, and we have our key and values. They are the same, right? So let's go ahead and run this, and I'm going to say kubectl apply -f03 port affinity add, and we have another one. It says specific containers.container. So let's look at that. Is you still have, okay, yeah, so this should be image, not container. This should be image. Hi, it should be image. It's hard not to have typos in this thing. Okay, so I'm going to say this, and it has created our pod, and this time around it's going to schedule the pod anyway, because this is the first pod with that label that is matching that expression. So let's say kubectl get pods o wide, right? And if we see that now it's inside this pod C add is inside mini cluster worker, and of course we can get the label associated with it as well. As a kubectl get pods, and I'll say show labels, and we should have this hap is my hap with this, right? So what do we now want to do now? We want to create another pod, and this pod we want it to match that same label as well. So when it does, they should be beside each other, right? So I'm going to say vim, I'm going to call this O3, but this time around instead of add, I'm going to say 1.yaml, right? And I'm going to say this, great. And this time around we're just going to write it. It's the same, it's almost the same thing. I'm going to say API version and v1. You can copy and paste and change few things in your own case if that was what you want. Kind port, and I'm going to say metadata, and this time around I'm going to say the name is pod d hard, right? And I'm going to, okay, great, be careful of typo, right? And I'm going to say labels should be the same as the last one. It's going to labels, and my key is going to be app, and my value is going to be my app. Then let's write the specification of the pod, and it's going to be, the type is affinity, and it's going to be pod affinity, and of course it's add requirement, so it's going to be required during scheduling, and then it's going to be ignore during execution. Yeah, please be careful. Typo once again. And I'm going to say label selector, and our label selector is going to be this. We're going to match expressions, and we are saying key is hap, and we are saying operator should be what? In, and our values should be what? My hap, right? So this is great. And one thing else we need to pass the topology key. You see topology key, don't forget, say Kubernetes.io, and this is going to be host name, right? And let's look at everything. I've written everything right. Required during scheduling, not during execution. Label selector, match expressions, key app, operator, my app. And now we need to write about our containers. I'm going to say containers, and this time I'm going to say name of the container is going to be my operating system. And of course, I'm going to say image this time. I'm not going to write container. I'm going to say it's going to be Ubuntu, right? So API version is v1, kind is pod, metadata, body hard, right? And I hope we are not going to get any typo this time around, right? Great. So, moment of truth. I'm going to say escape, and I'm going to save. And I'm going to say kubectl apply, and I'm going to say -f 03 pod affinity. I'm going to say 1, which is that one we did, and it has created. And if we say kubectl get pods 0 wide, we should see that they are inside the same thing. And if you look at it, pod C and pod D hard, see, they are. Ignore this crash look back off, don't worry about it. Well, just know that both of them are scheduled on the same node, mini cluster worker. And if you say kubectl get pods, so show labels, you see they have same labels. And see it, my hap, right? Ignore this one. Sometimes it happens like that. It's probably the Ubuntu that I wrote, and can change this sometimes. So you can try it on your own as well. You can change it to not in, right? If you change to not in, then it will, they will not be scheduled together, right? And it's the same thing. So if we go back to here, and I'm going to do something, I'm going to say 03. No. Let's say, let's clear this place, and I'm going to say vim 03, and let's say first one. And if we copy this, let's see if we are able to copy this successfully. Let's just copy this, and I want to try this soft one. So I'm going to say vim 04 pod affinity hard dot yaml, right? If I do this, just write it. So let's write it, vim, and write everything. So I'm going to say API version. I'm going to say is v1. And this time around, we want to write for soft, right? I'm going to say kind is pod. And the metadata, this time around, we are going to say the name is pod C soft, right? I'm going to say labels equals, and I'm going to say hap db. That's what I'm going to give it this time. And I'm going to say, okay, let me just give it app my hap as well, even though it's soft. I want them to be together, right? Because if we give it another one, let's give it this one. So I'm going to say specification, say spec, and this time it's going to be preferred instead of required, right? Preferred during scheduling, ignore during execution, right? And that's it. And we're going to say this is going to be okay, right? We skipped something. We skipped the affinity part, affinity, then the pod affinity, and this is going to be the third one, right? This is going to be the third one before it comes to, we're going to say this time around we are going to say weight. I'm going to say weight, give it 100. So if you find it, no worries, this is the highest, this is not weak, this is actually strong requirement, right? Put it there. Now I'm going to say something. I'm going to say pod affinity term, right? I'm going to say this time, I'm going to say again label selector and match expressions, and specify my key. The key is app, and I'm going to say operator. This time around I'm going to say the operator should be still in, right? And I'm going to say values. If we say not in, that means we don't want it to be there, right? So values, we say is going to be my app, right? And that's all about that. We just need to pass our this thing, our key, our topology key, and that should be on that label. So I'm going to say topology key is what? Kubernetes.io. This is slash hostname. And after this, we have to write our containers detail. What's the containers? I'm going to say this time around, I'm going to say name is my container 2. My container 2. And I'm going to say image is still in Nginx. No, not to worry, right? And if we've written everything the right way, we shouldn't have any issue at all, right? Wait, pod affinity term, and let's save this. And if you say kubectl apply F04, and it has created our port C, which is the soft. So let's say kubectl get pods O Y. Definitely is going to put it in that same place. And if you see it, port C soft, look at it, is inside our mini cluster, even though it is soft, but you know how to do both of them right about now, right? So if you use not in, which is going to be something you should try by yourself, it's not going to, they are not going to be together beside one another, right? So that's how it works. Thanks.